On this single day, May the 14th, the course of human civilization shifted not once, not twice, but across centuries and continents. In the fertile plains of northern Italy, French cavalry thundered across the fields of Agnadello, bringing the mighty Republic of Venice to its knees. Centuries later, in the wilderness of Texas, ink dried on the Treaties of Velasco, redrawing the map of a continent and birthing a new nation. And in our modern age, South Korea's highest court restored a president to power, proving that democracy's voice could echo louder than political turmoil. 3 moments. 3 turning points. 1 extraordinary. On the 14th of May, 2004, a nation held its breath as 9 justices prepared to deliver a verdict that would determine the fate of their democracy itself. South Korea stood at a crossroads. Just 2 months earlier, the National Assembly had voted to impeach President Moo-hyun, stripping him of his powers and plunging the young democracy into constitutional crisis. The charge? Violating election laws by expressing support for his political party ahead of parliamentary elections. But what happened next would prove to the world that democracy, when properly defended, can withstand even the most turbulent storms. To understand the magnitude of this moment, we must first understand what South Korea had endured. For decades, the peninsula had known military dictatorships, authoritarian rule, and the suppression of democratic voices. It was only in 1987 that mass protests finally forced genuine democratic reforms. The scars of that struggle remained fresh in the national memory. President Moo-hyun was no ordinary politician. A self-educated human rights lawyer who had never attended university, he rose from poverty to become the champion of a new generation hungry for change. His election in 2002 represented a seismic shift in Korean politics, powered by young voters and internet activism in ways the world had never seen before. When opposition parties, controlling a majority in parliament, moved to impeach him over what many considered a minor infraction, millions took to the streets in protest. They saw it not as justice, but as a political coup dressed in legal clothing. The Constitutional Court faced an impossible task: navigate a path between law and legitimacy, between procedure and popular will. And then came the verdict. By a vote of 5-4 on procedural grounds, and unanimously on the substantive question, the court ruled the impeachment unjustified. President Roh was immediately restored to power. South Korea's democratic institutions had been tested to their limits and had held firm. The ripple effects extended far beyond the peninsula. This case became a landmark study in constitutional law, demonstrating how independent courts could check legislative overreach without igniting civil unrest. It proved that peaceful resolution of political crisis was possible in Asia's youngest democracies. Today, as democracies worldwide face their own tests of institutional resilience, the Korean example shines as a beacon. It reminds us that constitutions are not merely documents but living shields, protecting the will of the people from those who would subvert it. The 14th of May 2004 was the day South Korea proved that true democracy defends itself not through force, but through the courage. On a spring morning in 1409, the rolling farmlands of northern Italy became a killing ground that would reshape the balance of power across Europe forever. The Battle of Agnadello was not merely a clash of armies. It was the moment when one of history's most remarkable republics, the serene Republic of Venice, faced its greatest existential crisis in 800 years of existence. Picture the world of early 16th century Italy. Venice stood as a marvel of civilization, a floating city of marble palaces, the undisputed queen of Mediterranean trade. Her merchants grew fabulously wealthy, connecting east and west. Her navy dominated the seas. And over centuries, her territorial ambitions had expanded deep into the Italian mainland, swallowing cities, fortresses, and fertile lands that others believed were rightfully theirs. This Venetian expansion terrified the great powers of Europe. And so they united against her. Pope Julius II, the warrior pope himself, forged an unprecedented alliance called the League of Cambrai. France, the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, and the Papal States joined forces with a single purpose: to dismember Venice and divide her territories among themselves. King Louis XII of France led the assault. His army, hardened by years of Italian campaigning and boasting the finest heavy cavalry in Europe, crossed into Venetian territory in the spring of 1509. The two forces met near the small town of Agnadello on the 14th of May. The Venetian army, commanded by the cousins Niccolo and Bartolomeo di Alviano, was formidable, but fatally divided by conflicting orders and personal rivalry. When French cavalry thundered into the Venetian lines, disaster followed. Bartolomeo di Alviano was captured. Thousands of Venetian soldiers lay dead or dying in the fields. Within weeks, Venice lost nearly everything she had spent a century conquering on the mainland. Yet here lies the remarkable turn. Venice did not perish. Through brilliant diplomacy, the Republic exploited divisions among her enemies, played one power against another, and ultimately survived. The League of Cambrai collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. But Agnadello marked a turning point. Never again would Venice reach for continental dominance. She would remain a great power, but a cautious one, her ambitions forever tempered by the memory of that catastrophic spring day. Today, the Battle of Agnadello reminds us how quickly fortunes can reverse, how alliances built on convenience inevitably fracture, and how even the mightiest states must recognize their limits. The diplomatic maneuvering that saved Venice established patterns of European statecraft that echo through centuries, into the coalition politics and balance of power thinking that still shapes international relations in our modern world. On a warm May afternoon in 1836, in a small coastal town on the Gulf of Mexico, two documents were signed that would forever alter the map of North America. These were the Treaties of Velasco, and they marked the dramatic end of a revolution that had captured the imagination of an entire continent. Just weeks earlier, the Texas Revolution had reached its bloody climax. The massacres at the Alamo and Goliad had sent shockwaves through the territory, and Mexican General Antonio López de Santa Anna seemed unstoppable. But then came San Jacinto. In a battle lasting merely 18 minutes, Sam Houston's ragtag army of Texan revolutionaries crushed the Mexican forces and captured Santa Anna himself. The President General of Mexico, the so-called Napoleon of the West, was now a prisoner of war. It was in this extraordinary circumstance that the Treaties of Velasco came to be. There were actually two documents signed that day, one public and one secret. The public treaty declared an immediate ceasefire and required Mexican troops to withdraw south of the Rio Grande. Santa Anna pledged never again to take up arms against Texas. The secret treaty went further still, with Santa Anna agreeing to use his influence to secure Mexican recognition of Texas independence, with its border set at the Rio Grande. Before these treaties, Texas existed in a state of chaos and uncertainty. Its people had declared independence in March, but declarations mean nothing without the power to enforce them. The Treaties of Velasco provided that crucial foundation, even if imperfectly. Mexico would later repudiate the agreements, claiming Santa Anna had no authority to sign while held captive, and the disputed territory between the Nueces River and Rio Grande would remain a flashpoint for another decade. Yet the significance of Velasco cannot be overstated. These treaties established the Republic of Texas as a functioning independent nation. For 9 years, Texas would exist as its own country, with its own president, its own currency, and its own foreign relations. This period of independence shaped a distinct Texan identity that persists to this day. The ripple effects of Velasco would ultimately help trigger the Mexican-American War in 1846, reshape the American Southwest, and set the stage for the sectional conflicts that led to the Civil War. Today, the legacy of these treaties lives on in everything from international border disputes to cultural identity. 6 flags have flown over Texas, and the republic born at Velasco remains central to how millions of people understand their heritage, their independence, and their place in history. From a president restored to power in Seoul, to French cavalry charging across Italian fields, to the birth of Texan independence signed in a small coastal town, today we've witnessed how single moments can redirect the course of nations. History reminds us that change, whether through courtrooms, battlefields, or treaties, often arrives when least expected. Now here's something to ponder: which invention do you think changed the world most? Was it the printing press, the internet, electricity, or something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments, we'd love to hear your thoughts. If these stories made you think, subscribe and join us next time for more journeys.